So is Karen with us this evening?
Michael,
Yes.
do you have to allow us into the meeting? Is she part of the people that need to be allowed into it?
I'm not the host, so I don't control who's admitted. I think that's
Okay,
Jason.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
I just let everybody in. I'm the doorman.
So Jason, you just let him all in?
Yeah, actually, it's a forced feature from Zoom. You either have to have a password or a waiting room on your meetings. You can't just go without anymore. So, figured it was easier than a password.
Okay. So we don't have Karen with us yet, is that right?
I don't see her. I'll send her a text real quick.
Okay. So let me just, I'm not going to do it. This isn't official, but I'm just curious. So I see David, I see Mr. Steck, correct? And let's see, Brad, are you with us?
I don't see Brad yet. Usually I see him. Oh, Brad's in the waiting room. 1 second. And there's Karen. We're slowly getting everybody in.
Okay. Do we have Mr. Saylor?
I'm finally here, Michael.
I see you there.
I had trouble getting the computer to come up. But I'm here.
All right, good. Thank you. So I have, let's see, Mike Brown.
Yes.
Great. So I think maybe so let me look here. Do I have Mr. David Saylor? I don't hear him.
Do you hear it now?
There we go. Thank you. Okay, it looks like we have everybody here. It's 7:02. I don't know, in terms of others attending, I don't know if we had anyone else that we needed to wait for, but it's 7:02 and I think we should get moving since we're all here. So I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals to order. First, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance, if we could. I pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance
to the
to
flag
the flag
of the United States of
of the
America
States of America,
and to the republic
to
for
the
which it
republic
stands,
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible, with
indivisible,
liberty and justice for
liberty and
all.
justice for all.
I'll call the roll. Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. London is here. Mr. Saylor,
Here.
Mr. Stack. Mr. Stack,
Here, can you hear me?
I can now, thank you. And Mr. Warble,
Here.
okay. Are there any witnesses that want to speak in favor or against any of the business in front of the board this evening?
Pardon me.
Yes, this is Mr. Copeland, and I would like to speak in favor of this thing getting passed today, so
Okay.
I'm curious
So
to,
what I'd like to do, Mr. Copeland, let me ask first, is there anyone else? If not, if we could, I would like to go ahead and swear you in.
okay.
So if you could just repeat after me, I,
I,
and state your name,
Landon Copeland,
do declare and affirm
do declare and affirm
that the testimony that I shall give
that the testimony that I shall give
will be the truth,
will be the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you. So this evening, for everybody's purposes, I just want to review, we are picking up on the case that we were reviewing on September the 3rd, I believe. And that is BZA case number 202003. The address being 12145 Amity Road, Brookville, Ohio. The nature of this appeal is to build a 3,200 square foot pole barn, 80 by 40 with a 12-foot height, with a 1-bedroom apartment. Excuse me, with the intention that Mr. Copeland will reside in the apartment until a house is built and then use the apartment as a mother-in-law suite. So for our discussion, I'd like to open it for those in favor. So Mr. Copeland, if you would, please.
Yes, I am in favor.
Is there anything that you'd like to share with us this evening?
Nothing more, I guess, than what was spoken last time.
Okay,
Just curious for a decision, I guess.
all right. Karen, do you have any updates or information that you want to share?
Well, the information that I have is that we did find out that the property is an R1.
Okay,
And I emailed each of you the information on the second part of the question that I was asked to look into, which was, hold on one second. To find out information if something is zoned in one zoning code, how might it be changed to another? And what is the process for, in fact, to make that happen? And it is a big process. That's why I emailed each of you a copy of Article 6. That is where it gives a step-by-step what we would need to do if we would need to change something.
okay. So, Karen, let me ask you this. With the, one of the questions that had come up, if I remember correctly last time, was what was it zoned? And was that R1 clearly restricting more than one residence? And then we had a question about the residence itself in terms of a legal definition. So you had a chance to speak to the prosecutor's office?
I did.
And what did they share with you?
Basically, he said that it was our call, but that we would still need to follow our zoning.
You mean our call in terms of the interpretation of the word residence?
Yes,
So that, and I assume this was Nathan?
that's correct.
Okay, so because the question that had come up, as we were saying, is if we were considering a residence, a single family, but in 2 physical buildings, would that be 1 residence or would it be 2 residences?
He said that that would be in 2 separate buildings, it would be 2 residences.
Okay. Okay, So when you say it was our call, he's saying it's our call as to whether or not we were to allow for an appeal.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure that we're clear about the interpretations that we have,
Right.
the legal interpretation. So he's still considering that is in fact two residences, whether it's the
Yes.
same family or not.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone here before the board begins deliberation on this that would like to speak against this appeal? And excuse my drippy nose here. If there isn't, then I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public portion of this hearing. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion to close.
There's been a motion made by Mr. Brown. Is there a second?
I second it.
I'm sorry, who was that?
David said,
David Steck. I just want to make sure you can get it down, Karen. Sometimes that's hard to hear. Because it's difficult to hear, I'm going to do a roll call on this. So those in favor of closing the motion to close, Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Saylor,
Yes.
Mr. Steck,
yes,
Mr. Warble,
Yes,
and Mr. London abstains. Okay, so I will, I'd like to open this up for discussion. Are there questions that the board has before before a decision's made tonight? Or are there particular perspectives that you want to share? Any of you?
I have a quick question, Michael. It's Mike Brown.
Yes.
Has there ever been a ruling that has been passed and then had a letter of agreement or acknowledgement that follows it by the owner acknowledging what the board's decision is to ensure that it's followed throughout the fruition of the building project?
It's hard for me to answer, to be honest with you. It's hard for me to answer if there's been that specific kind of a letter. I do remember and am aware of, and David Saylor might help me with this because he's got a long memory. On many of these cases, we have had stipulations that have been attached to and as a part of a motion that have in fact been enunciated in a letter that went out from the zoning administrator with as far as communication goes. So I don't know if that's quite what you're thinking, Mike, or
It's
or
real
if you're
close.
thinking more of a letter of commitment.
I was thinking more of like a possible notarized letter of understanding and acceptance. So the things that we rule on are taken seriously and are abided by knowingly. So in the future that everything is, all the dots are dotted, or the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed.
So you're really, if I understand you correctly, Mike, you're really looking at a letter that of commitment.
That's what I was just curious about. I didn't know if it was out of protocol or if it's something that had been done in the past or how that was handled.
Yeah. I don't know if it has been. I don't know that it's out of line though. David Saylor, do you have any memory on anything like that?
No, Michael, I do not. As you said, we normally, if something is approved that has some reason, we always stipulate it in the motion. You know, for instance, that if it's a mother-in-law or whatever, that once they pass or move away or whatever, that ends what is in effect. You know, this is a most unusual case. As you mentioned at the start about the R1, which definitely restricts it to one dwelling. And it's a long, lengthy process to get the zoning commission to change that. It would take quite a bit of doing. As to, the building, it definitely, if he puts an apartment in there, that's one resident. And if this would be approved, it would definitely have to be, I would think, with some stipulations and very serious stipulations as to how to proceed all afterwards, or he'll not get a permit to build a house. And I don't want to do anything, I don't want to mislead him into something that would cause him to have a problem building his residence. And I'm not objecting to him living in his barn. I mean, that's up to him, but, we have to look to the client and see if we can do something that help them, but also not tie the hands of the whole township. But I know of nothing, as Mike said, that we would stipulate a commitment. I'm not saying we couldn't do it, but I've never known of it, not in my 15, 16 years.
Yeah,
Michael?
thank you. I haven't either, David. Karen, did you have?
Yes, I wanted to say, I received a phone call today. Another resident is wanting to put in a mother-in-law suite. And I told her that, there can only be one residence on one parcel. If they haven't drawn up the plans yet as far as building the house. And the only thing that I could suggest is for them to look at the design of the house and possibly add the apartment where it is attached to the house. That would make it one parcel. I mean, one residence. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, if in fact it's in a single building, a single dwelling, which is what I think David was alluding to before. If it's a single building and it's divided in different ways, for instance, like one floor has its own separate entrance or something like that, my understanding legally, that can be considered a single residence, that single building. It's when you have more than one building that the two separate dwellings, in fact, legally mean there are two residences.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and this, they were looking at property on Air Hill and Heckathorn. So this is becoming more and more frequently asked about a suite. So we definitely have got to come up with guidelines on, so I know what to tell people when they call me.
Well, I think one of the things, Karen, is that, well, two things come to mind here. Number one, first of all, this hasn't come that before this board in the last, 15, 20 years that I'm aware of. And as David was saying, this is not common. However, what it does, whatever we decide, whatever this board decides, will in fact set some precedent. And so we do, I think, want to be cautious and careful about what kind of precedents we set. The one thing is that the prosecutor made clear was, in fact, that if we wanted to change something, the place to change it's probably in the zoning. But because two different buildings or dwellings will constitute two different residences, and residence is I believe is the terminology in the code. So we might be able to provide some answer, but it's the zoning board that may need to also address, because we're really looking at appeals that are exceptions to that. If it looks like something that's frequent, it would definitely be something I would say that really should have some thought given to it by by the zoning commission themselves.
I agree.
Michael,
Yes.
if I might interrupt.
No, you're fine, David.
You made the comment a few minutes ago about the addition onto a house, which normally, if the county approves an addition and it falls within our zoning, I mean, it would be okay, I would think. The only thing is, I believe you mentioned that it could have an outside entrance. It would still have to have a connection to the inside,
Yes.
or else it would be called a duplex or a condo or whatever. It would fall in a two-family deal if it wasn't connected.
That's exactly right. Yeah. No, that's a good point, David, because it would, in fact, unless there's an interior connection, be considered a separate residence within a
That's
single
right.
dwelling. Let me ask Brad, do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, I think we could, you're pretty good at parsing out the wording where we could stipulate in there that, after the home is built, that it no longer is used as an apartment as part of our appeal, as part of the appeal determination. I do agree, though, that this mother-in-law house is probably going to be an ongoing issue. I might want to live in a mother-in-law house at some point.
Oh.
You'd make a cute mother.
Oh, gentlemen, I'm not going there. I'm going to try and be good here on this. But so Brad, your point being that that you're inclined to be able to grant an appeal if in fact there was a stipulation that clarified that once the primary residence was built, that this would no longer be allowed to be used as a residence for anybody, that it would have to change its usage. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, as far as the permanent residence, I mean, if it's for a stayover weekend or a couple weeks or whatever, but as far as a permanent residence, that could be an issue. So you'd have two residents there again.
So Brad, for instance, if this apartment was changed to an office or something.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Michael?
David, go ahead.
I tend to agree with Brad, but the only thing is just to have a place for relatives to stay over normally don't have a separate kitchen and all that. He'd probably have to turn the kitchen into the office.
Well, we can make the stipulations if you all are inclined to allow this with stipulations. We can make those stipulations clear. It's up to the appellant as to whether or not they want to move forward. So if your stipulation is that once the primary dwelling is complete, that primary dwelling must be the residence, and that this can no longer be used as a residence, it must change its usage.
Well,
go ahead, David.
In this situation, and I think we all lean toward letting him do it. The only thing is, it'd be so much simpler just to build a house, because this is a can of worms, guys. We're going to have to be real careful how this is worded.
I agree.
Because, as Karen said, in the future, this may come up. And even this, if that apartment was attached to instead of in the barn, if it's just part of the house, I'd say he'd have no problem whatsoever continuing to build a house.
Right.
But this is a different ball game, and it ain't up to me to advise him. But boy, I'd look at it awful hard before I build it, because he might You know, every one of us could be gone in a whole new regime here before he gets ready to build that house, and he might have trouble doing it.
Yeah. Mr. Steck, did you have any thoughts you wanted to share on this at this point?
Yeah. I'm in agreement. I have no problem with him having this to live in while he builds. But I think it should be very carefully worded that that would be the end of somebody living there when the house is built. And I was wondering what Mr. Copeland might think about having an addition on the house that would do the same thing. So it's a single dwelling then. If he would have a problem with changing a plan to suit that.
That's an interesting question. Before I do want to be careful, just a protocol, so that we want to be careful if we do want to reopen the public portion of the hearing. We can do that. I don't have a problem with that, but that's what we need. That's what we should do. Is that what you're asking, David, or David Steck, or is it just a question you had in your mind?
No, it's something I would like to hear him address, because if he said, that, yeah, we could do that and add something to the house, then this would not be an issue with the barn to begin with. other
Okay.
than Building it.
So if that being the case, I would be happy to entertain a motion to reopen the public portion of the hearing. Is there a motion to that effect?
David Saylor, I make it.
Is there a second to that? Mr. Steck, would you like to second that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
All right. If I could, I'll call the roll on this, Mr. Brown.
Here.
Are you in favor of this?
Oh, yes.
Mr.
Sorry.
Saylor, in favor, against?
Yes.
Mr. Steck,
Yes,
Mr. Warble,
Yes.
and Chair abstains. The public portion is open again. There's no need for swearing in again or anything like that. But Mr. Copeland, if you would like to address the board, you've heard the question that's been put. If you would, and we're happy to clarify if need be.
Yes, no, I have definitely thought about that route, but in all reality, our financial situation doesn't allow us to go forth with the type of house that we would like to build at this time, in which we do have the funds to complete this barn. So that's pretty much our main reason for kind of going about it this way.
Okay.
And as far as, the mother-in-law suite being attached to the home in the future, that's, more than likely the possibility if it's not going to be granted in the barn.
Okay.
But, I think regardless, I would still like to build a barn first, whether, I get to live in it or not. That's just, what we plan on doing with our finances that we have.
All right. And so you've heard some of the suggestions in the discussion, and I think you understand our dilemma and
Yes.
our desire to try to maintain the integrity of the code and grant an appeal with just special exception. And so what's been suggested is that that once a primary residence was built, that that this residence within a barn would no longer be allowed to be used as a residence. I'd like your thoughts on that.
I would be willing to commit to something like that. As far as maybe rearranging some things, turning the kitchen into an office, I'm not sure if I'm real keen on that after all the hard work that I'd put into building it. I'd hate to, a couple years later, tear thousands of dollars of of stuff out. I could easily rationalize, my office. I like to sometimes make myself lunch during the workday, so I
Okay.
don't know if there's a necessity for that, but I would definitely be willing to, sign something that it would no longer be used as a residence.
Okay. Is there anything else, Mr. Kelsey or Mr. Copeland, that you would want to share with us before we close this public portion?
No, I think you guys got the idea of what I want to do, and yeah, I just put the decision in your guys' hands to make a fair decision, and yeah.
Okay, before we close, is there a board member that has any other question before we close the public portion again? If not, then I'd like to entertain a motion to close the public portion of this hearing again. Is there a motion to that effect?
Yeah, Brad makes the motion.
Brad moves. Is there a second to that?
Yes, I'll second it.
Okay. We have a second. I'll quickly, Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Saylor,
Yes.
Mr. Stack,
Yes.
Mr. Warble,
Yes.
and the chair abstains. So the public portion is closed. So gentlemen, it's just back on us. Let me ask this. The primary suggestion that we have here is to grant this appeal with a stipulation that at the point that the primary dwelling is built, complete, and I assume livable, that this residence inside the barn would no longer be able to be used as a residence. Is that
Right. Or a rental.
I say that again, David?
Or a rental.
Or a rental. Now, let me, so even if it was, we're talking about a usage change. So whether it was a residence for family or somebody else, we're saying no. Is that what I'm
Correct.
hearing?
Right. That's right.
Okay. So what if,
Michael,
so if the usage changed, David, if the use, David Saylor, if the usage changed and it became an office, would it be able to be rented out as an office?
I would say no, because that'd be right. You'd be back in the same boat. You're bringing somebody else in.
Okay. Then it's because it's all the more important that we make sure that that language is included then.
But
That's
I'd
right.
I'd like to add though that that's, an office is not a residence. People rent out their barn space, rent out different things on their property that aren't residences. As long as
Okay.
somebody's not, as long as somebody's not living there, it's not a residence.
Right, right. And that's why I was pushing to clarify that. Mr. Brown, did you have a comment?
I was trying to think about a motion to make earlier, and some of the things that I had written down that I thought might want to be mentioned is that we actually call this a temporary residence instead of a residence. And the other thing was that I was curious about if we could add is that this entity is never given a separate address, even in the transfer of ownership. And then my other point was, a possible letter, a notarized letter of understanding and acceptance of the, of the things that we're reflecting here upon this decision.
Good points.
And I'm writing as I'm listening.
The other point that I wanted to make is to make sure that that Mr. Copeland understood the regulations that we have concerning buildings and barns in relationship to houses, to make sure that when the barn's laid out, that it's in the appropriate areas, that we don't have to revisit this via a positioning problem like we've had in past cases.
So we're talking about the front of this barn being behind the residence.
Correct. I think it needs to be called out clearly so that Mr. Copeland doesn't locate the barn or the house in a position that may be liable to come back before the board.
Okay, as I've been scribbling here, as you've been commenting, let me just quickly run around one more time. Mr. Steck, do you have any other thoughts that you want to share before we move forward?
No, I agree with what's been discussed. I think that it should be spelled out explicitly that this is temporary while the house is being built, and then it comes to an end.
Brad, Mr. Warvel, is there other thoughts you want to share?
I think Mike covered it good with the temporary residence, no separate address, and probably have some sort of a notarized commitment from the owner.
Okay. Mr. Saylor, other thoughts?
No, sir, I don't. That sounds good. As long as it's included in all that, I totally agree with it.
And Mr. Brown, other thoughts?
No, sir. I'm on board with what we're talking about.
I have then just one question for all of us, and this is something that we have encountered in the past, and that has to do with time frames. If I'm going to give you a couple scenarios, assume that this is built. This barn with a residence in it, a one-bedroom apartment in it, it was built. And for some reason, the primary residence isn't built. Does that present any problems to you?
I'll speak up. It's Mike Brown. I don't see where it would be a problem with anything as far as we've been described here, unless there's something that I don't know about in the zoning guidelines about the structure of a home and the certain criteria that it needs to fill.
Okay.
Michael?
Yes, David.
I agree with Michael there Mike there that in that time frame, if we approve it, he's got a year to put that barn up. As long as he understands that. I believe according to our ruling, there's 1 year stipulation. I don't know how you would frame as to when the permanent resident would go up, but in the meantime, he's got a roof over his head.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know any other way we could do to help him any better and still hope to stay legal. That commitment to be from him, signed and notarized, I totally agree with, because it can go on file, and if none of us are around, then that would be some more notability that would be on file that others could look at.
Okay. Do any of the board members, Brad, David Steck, either of you have any other comments you'd like to share before we move forward?
I'm good with it.
No, I'm good. And any kind of stipulation on when he needs to build the house, I think, that could be, next year or never. It's, situations can change. He may move from the area or whatever. You just never know what the future is going to hold.
Well, and that was one of the reasons I brought up about the time frame, so that, for instance, if in fact we grant this appeal for this owner, and something changes and it's built, that the barn is built, the residence in the barn is built, and then somebody else comes along and wants to build a house there, do they have, because they didn't own it at the time, must they follow the same same stipulations?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, the only way that I think that without making a special stipulation, which would require us to have a deed restriction that would affect a future owner, I really think it means that someone new coming, when they were to put in an application to build, and I could be wrong on this, but when they put in an application to build a residence, we'd technically say there's already a residence there. And it probably shouldn't be allowed, if that makes any sense, unless by the zoning code, unless in fact they were to buy into the same stipulations of a change of usage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand it, Michael. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So in that case, I guess I'm thinking that, I mean, the time frame in terms of building and who and whatever, I think we can count on the zoning text as at least as it is. It may be changed, and I think we can count on those things to address the issues of a time frame and a change in ownership. If we include the other items that you've talked about, which was the designation of a temporary residence, that the letter of understanding, and Mike, what was the second one about not separate? I want to make
Separate. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
I think you mentioned a separate address couldn't be permitted, would never be permitted.
That's it, address. Thank you. Couldn't even read my own writing. Okay. Well, let's see if we can't frame a motion here. And before we do, let me make sure that I get the primary points clear. First of all, that this is a temporary residence and its usage would change after after the primary dwelling is built. That's number one. And please jump in, you guys, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding anything. The second point was that these two dwellings could not have a separate address. The third, that would be that there would be a letter of understanding, and that letter of understanding between the appellant and the township would be that that they would commit to a usage change of this space at which time the primary residence is completed and livable. Was there anything else I'm missing, guys? Feels like
I'm
I might
sorry,
be.
Michael. I got dropped there, and I actually missed your whole statement until the very end. I hate to ask.
That's
you,
okay.
Can you repeat that just one more
I'm glad
time?
you're back, Mike. Let me go through it real quick again. I just want to get the major points, but before we try to fashion a motion, since there seems to be agreement here and support. The first point is that this is a temporary residence until such time as there a change in until the primary dwelling is built, and then there must be a change in usage, and this may no longer be used as a residence in the barn. The second point was that they not have separate addresses. The third point was that there was a letter of understanding that would be created between the township and the appellant, a letter of understanding that they would abide by this at the time of the completion of the primary residence. And Mike, was there a fourth thing?
How about the transfer of ownership? Because can we address that? That
Okay,
this would be
go ahead.
I guess I would be wanting to stipulate this, that this is a decision that goes with the property rather than with the owner, and that it stays with the property. So the transfer of ownership would not change the decision that was rendered by the board.
Okay.
And I didn't know if you wanted to address the positioning of the building in accordance to the future homes location. So it would be in
Yes.
accordance with the existing zoning writings.
All right. So what I'm going to do, if you fellas don't mind, I'm going to take a half a minute here and try to, so I don't waste our time really. I'm going to try and type something up. And so that I can entertain a motion for you. And poor Karen doesn't have to go crazy as we rewrite and reword, and then I can try and get this. So I'd like, if you guys are in agreement, just take a breather for about 5 minutes and use the restroom. We're still open. Is that all right? Any objections to that?
Sounds
No
good.
objections for me.
No objections. I say y'all take a break for a minute and let me type. Okay. So what I need now is, before I even actually entertain this motion, I want to make sure that what I've drafted here reflects the concerns and the concepts that each of you have voiced, because sometimes I may just choose the wrong word that doesn't actually reflect what it is you want to have. So I'd like to do this, run through this with you a piece at a time, and just have you feedback to me what you'd like to change before we formalize any motion. So my suggestion is going to be that in this case number, and we'll name the number, that we grant the appeal for the pole barn to be built with a 1-bedroom apartment in which the owner will reside until a primary home is built, with the following stipulations. And please stop me after each stipulation if there's something that's not the best it could be. Stipulation number 1. This 1-bedroom apartment / barn is only a temporary residence and may not be used for a residence after a primary dwelling is completed and livable. At that time, the usage for this 1-bedroom apartment in the barn must be repurposed for another use and not a residence or primary living space for any individual or individuals. Does that capture this, or did I miss something?
This is Mike. It sounds great to me.
Okay. Let's go on to number 2. These 2 buildings may not have different addresses. Simple, I think. Point number 3. A letter of understanding will be agreed to by the owner and the township that will stipulate the commitment of both parties to the conditions of this agreement.
And notarized accordingly.
Oh, there you go. Hang on, David, that's good. And notarized accordingly. Okay. Number 4, unless somebody else got something. Number 4, included in this letter will be an understanding that this agreement applies to any owner of this property so long as the township zoning regulations prohibit multiple residences on a single property. No future property owner may change this understanding.
That sounds great.
Is
Yeah.
that what you were after, Mike?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, David?
Yes.
Okay. Point number 5. When the primary dwelling is built, it must adhere to all township zoning regulations, especially as it applies to the location and placement of barns and homes.
Yeah, that's well addressed. Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything I've missed? If there's nothing else, then I'd like to move forward and actually entertain a motion if this discussion is complete.
Michael, I have one comment.
Go ahead, Brad.
On number 2, I believe it was, it
Yes.
just said buildings. You might want to go ahead and spell out, residence and barn.
Okay, let's do that. Good point. Okay. Anything else? You're not doing anything but improving it, believe me.
I felt like that captured everything.
Okay. All right, in that case,
Yeah.
Mike? Anybody have a comment?
Sounds okay, Mike.
Okay. All right, let's do this. Let me read this, and I'll do this as formally as I'll be entertaining this motion. I will not be making it, and I'll look for somebody to make it after it's completed. So I will entertain a motion to read as follows. Karen, I will send this to you. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
I will email this to you this evening, so you don't, if you don't want to write it down, you don't have to.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll entertain the following motion. In case number BZA 202003, the Board of Zoning Appeals grants this appeal for a pole barn to be built
You
with a
missed the-
one-bedroom apartment, in which the owner will reside until a primary home is built with the following stipulations. 1, this one-bedroom apartment / barn is only a temporary residence and may not be used for a residence after a primary dwelling is completed and livable. At that time, the usage for this one-bedroom apartment in the barn must be repurposed for another use and not a residence or primary living space for any individual or individuals. These two buildings, point number 2, these two buildings, a home and a barn, may not have different addresses. Point number 3, a letter of understanding will be agreed to by the owner and the township that will stipulate the commitment of both parties to the conditions of this agreement and notarized accordingly. Point number 4, included in this letter will be an understanding that this agreement applies to any owner of this property so long as the township zoning regulations prohibit multiple residences on a single property. No future property owner may change this understanding. Point number 5, when the primary dwelling is built, it must adhere to all township zoning regulations, especially as it applies to the location and placement of barns and homes. That is the motion incomplete. Is there a trustee or is there a board member who would like to make that motion?
I'll go ahead and make that motion, Michael. It's Mike Brown.
Mr. Brown moves the motion that was entertained. Is there a second to that?
Yeah, Brad will second.
Brad, Mr. Warble seconds. Now that the motion is on the floor, before we take a vote real quick, I want to point out that the only, it seems to me that the only questions that we have to look at in terms of variance and conditional use, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that in the variance, the only thing that we would not be asking for an area variance. We'd only be talking about a use variance only. Is there anyone who disagrees with that? And on the conditional use, I believe the only questions that we would be talking about would be the questions for something on its conditional use, which this is, for something other than lot splits. So if that's the case, then what I would like to do is I would like to, now that we have this motion on the floor formally, is I'd like to complete the question on this for both variance and conditional use prior to the vote on the motion itself. And I will read these. I don't know if everybody has theirs in front of them. So questions for BZA members in order to meet the standards for a variance as set forth in section 405.05. The board shall not grant a variance in each specific case until it has made a finding of fact directly based on the evidence presented in each of the following questions. All questions must be answered true by a majority of board members present for the variance to be approved. In this case, we have only one, and that is strict application of this zoning resolution would constitute unnecessary hardship or restriction on the property owner or applicant. True?
True.
True.
Mr. Stack?
True.
Brad?
Sorry, I had it muted. True.
True. Okay. So we'll make a note that Karen, you have a copy of the variance. Please note that that is true.
Okay.
And then on conditional use. Questions for BZA members in order to meet the standards for a conditional use as set forth in section 406.05. The board shall not grant a conditional use in each specific case until it has made a finding of fact based upon the evidence presented in each of the following questions. All questions must be answered true by a majority of the members present for the conditional use to be approved. These questions are, first, all necessary permits and license for use and operation have been obtained or evidence has been submitted that such permits are obtainable. True? Mr. Stack?
True.
Mr. Brown?
True.
Mr. Warble?
True.
Mr. Saylor?
True.
Second point, all exterior lighting will be so shaded as to avoid casting direct light upon any property, residence, or street. True, Mr. Brown?
True.
Mr. Saylor?
True.
Mr. Warble?
True.
Mr. Stack?
True.
All third and last, all structures, walls, fences, landscaping, and other screening on site is so designed that it will not hinder or discourage other development, use, and enjoyment of adjacent land or structures. True. Mr. Brown?
True.
Mr. Warble?
True.
Mr. Stack?
True.
Mr. Saylor?
True.
Okay, Karen, you have all of those?
Yes, sir, I do.
So then I would like to call the question on the motion that has been made by Mr. Brown. I won't restate that motion. We all have it. I would like to call the question on that. Mr. Brown. Let me try one more time. It may cut in and out. I'm calling the roll call on the motion on the floor, which is the approval with the stipulations. The motion that was read before. Does anybody need this read? No. Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Saylor?
Yes.
Mr. Stack?
Yes.
Mr. Warble?
Yes.
And the chair abstains. The motion is passed. Mr. Copeland, at some point moving forward, our zoning administrator will get with you to be able to get you a copy of this, as well as to work with the township on crafting a letter of understanding. Jason, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Jason, this is what we have put here is that there be a letter of understanding between the township, and that means in this case the trustees.
Mhm.
That's what we've approved, and the property owner. Is that something that you can undertake to help the zoning administrator craft something like that? Because it would need to be a township trustee to sign off on it, as well as the owner.
Yes, Karen will coordinate with the trustees and get that done.
Okay, great. Do any board members have any further questions about this particular case?
I have a comment, Michael.
Please, David.
Before you send that to Karen, I may have misunderstood, but when you stipulated case number BZA 2020, then 003, I think you missed a zero, but maybe it was me.
0. Yeah, it should be. It's what you said, David. I think I got it. Oh, I have it typed right. I might have said it wrong.
Oh, okay. Just double checking.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, Karen, when you look at this, double check and make sure I didn't, dot my I's and cross my T's.
You got it.
Because Lord knows there'll be one of them that needs it. Okay, if there's nothing else on this motion other than to say, Mr. Copeland, we thank you for your patience as we work this through, and your understanding of the role that we have and the challenge that we face as we're looking at precedents, and we wish you the best of luck.
Yes, and I appreciate that, and thank you guys for all your time.
Absolutely. Next on the agenda, we have the next thing we have on the agenda is the minutes from September the 3rd. And I have to ask this question, and that is, did everyone receive a copy? Because somehow, Karen, mine didn't come through.
I will
Yeah,
make
Brad.
sure you get a copy.
Okay, Brad, did you get a copy?
Yeah, I've received and read.
You've received and read them, Mr. Steck. Have you received and read them?
Yes, I have.
And Mr. Saylor, have you received and read the minutes?
I picked mine up and I have read them.
And Mr. Brown, have you had a chance to read and receive them and read them?
Yes, I have.
Then I would like to ask if, I haven't, but I'm not worried about me. I would like to ask if any of you have any, does anyone here feel a need for those to be read?
No, but we do need to make one correction.
All right, so David, could you go ahead with the correction? And Karen, I'll count on you since I don't have a copy right now.
Well, this was something that I commented on. The nearest thing that we have been faced with is that we have been asked 2 or 3 times to let them put a mobile home in the rear of the house for a mother-in-law or father-in-law. And we allowed it with the stipulation. And it reads as this, that the stipulation happened that either one of those people, then the mobile home had to be moved. It doesn't state, it should state that if either one of them passed or moved away. We need to include that in that line, Karen.
Okay, good.
I'm looking for it. Hang on just a second.
We can
Okay,
we can wait.
It's the second page and about a third of the way down.
Okay, I found it.
Okay.
So you want
Anyway,
me to
that
add
needs-
what? You want me to add what?
Well, it says the stipulation happened that either one, that it should say if either one of those people passed away or moved away, then the mobile home had to be moved. That was, but we left out a little bit in there, a couple words. We left out that if they deceased or moved away, that just needs to be added to it because it doesn't stipulate what we were talking about.
Okay, I've got it in there, so I'll make the correction.
Thank you, Miss Karen.
You're welcome.
That's good. Mr. Brown, did you have any corrections?
No, sir.
Mr. Warble,
No, I'm good.
Mr. Stack,
Good with me.
Mr. Saylor, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, so if that being the case, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as submitted and corrected. Is there a motion to that effect, Mr. Saylor?
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Is there a second, Mr. Brown?
I'll second it.
And without objection, so ordered. Okay, are there any announcements, Karen, that that you have for us?
Just that there's been a request for another BZA appeals hearing for November 5th. If everybody's good with that date, I'm going to move forward on it as long as you guys are okay with that.
November 5th?
Yes.
Any objections?
No.
Okay. Sounds like you can move ahead with it, Karen.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay. And maybe Karen, maybe what we'll do is, again, for some reason, I know I didn't get the minutes. Maybe there's a problem somehow with because I got some of the things you sent me.
I didn't get minutes either. I had to pick them up.
So, okay, because I didn't get the information up for tonight for the actual, the link. I got that from Mr. Brown for the Zoom link.
I had that with the minutes, so I don't know why.
So
didn't go
wherever they
through.
went, wherever it went,
It
went
actually-
with it. Okay.
It actually showed up on my computer that your mail bounced, Michael.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's a shame because I got some stuff. So Karen, if we need to test a little bit more, and if we can't get it through, then you let me know and I'll come pick it up, or you can drop it in the mailbox, whatever you want.
Okay, we'll do it.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything else, or Karen, do you have any announcements for us?
No, I just wanted to verify that the next BZA meeting would be good for November 5th.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Anything else? Board members have anything else, comments? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion to that effect?
Brad
Mr.
makes the motion.
Brad makes the motion. Is there a second to that, Mr. Stack?
I'll second it.
I appreciate you doing that. And without objection, so ordered. Mr. Saylor.
That's fine.
All righty.
Let's go get something to eat.
Yes, that sounds good. Thank you all this evening. This is a challenge sometimes doing it this way. Jason, thank you for being there to facilitate this for us.
Not a problem.
Oh,
Happy to
yeah.
do it.
Absolutely. Great. Well, we'll see you all. If nothing else, we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Michael.
That's right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Karen, I'll
Good
send
night,
this to you tonight.
Okay, thanks.
You're very welcome.